Hello and good evening. I am not Rocky Petrella. I am not Andrew Hall, but I am the one and only Scott Sidlow here on Dynasty Junkies episode 76. Thank you for tuning in tonight with us, or maybe you're listening later in the week, or maybe you're watching us on YouTube. But however you enjoy the content, we appreciate you. Tonight we have just one of my brethren here, not only another beautiful man named Scott, but also another portfolio dynasty player. So, listen, he used to play for the New Jersey Devils. He was a defenseman, Scott Stevens. No, just kidding. But his name is Scott Stevens at FF Stockbroker. And before we get to him, Andrew, how's it going, my brother?
Oh, it's going well. It's going well. Looking forward to a fun conversation with the pair of Scots.
Oh yeah, baby. You got us both. It might be a long night. But we'll try to get to the point. So my man, Scott Stevens, welcome. Thank you for being here, man. Why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and how many leagues you're in?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invite. I've listened to you guys for a while, and Scott, you alluded to it earlier in the little shoot the shit session before we started recording here that you and I had been in the league together for a couple of years, couple of seasons, and didn't know it at the time, and then we found out realizing it and bonding over the hell that is that league. And
bad commissioners.
Yeah, I know, right? Commissioner is such a big thing for a league. I don't want to get off topic, but yeah, I mean, a good commissioner can totally help a league, and we do not have anything close to a good commissioner in that league.
No, sir.
It's super cool to find that out, and I appreciate you guys having me on. I know we've talked a lot of strategies before, and you or I, actually all three of us, because Andrew and I are in the Dynasty Trades HQ Patreon. You and I are in Scott Connor's Dynasty and Chill Patreon, and so
good
we
friends of the
bond
show
often over different strategies and stuff like that, and so like I said, appreciate you having me on. I'm currently in 54 leagues. It's probably about 20 leagues more than I should have and can handle. It's crazy. Sometimes you feel. What's nuts is when I go through waivers and I feel like I got all my waivers in, and then I see waivers run like the next morning, and I forgot about the damn league, but then two, forgot to put my waivers in for that league. And being in that many leagues, I've got waivers that run at midnight my time, 2:00 in the morning my time, 5:00 in the morning my time. And it's like, I'm at the gym at 5 and I'm like, shit, the waivers just went through and I whiffed on them. And, so like I said, sometimes it's great from, our build approach to be in that many leagues, but it's a management nightmare sometimes. The spreadsheets that I have for all of my leagues is something that analytics guys would drool over for sure.
No doubt. Having being in 46 myself, I'm right there with you. I mean, we're no Scott Connor, but we can hold our own in the portfolio game. So
that's 100 between the two of you. That's 100 leagues between the two of you. That's a lot
wild.
Of leagues. It's a lot of leagues.
I mean, it's our own market. We have our own market. It's
yeah. Well, and you know what? I was going to ask you. So we talk about thresholds sometimes, for certain players and the threshold of percent of leagues that you want to own somebody. What is your personal threshold? Because I differ from some of the guys in the league, especially for elite guys like a Jonathan Taylor or something like that. Like I've got 30% JT, and I've got no issue with it. Whereas some people say if you've got 20% or more, then you're screwing yourself. What are your guys' kind of personal thresholds for holding those kind of guys? Because
so
if I look at it like a stock or like an investment portfolio, like I do with clients at work, for me, it's like a guy like JT or a guy like, Chase or Jefferson or something like that. Those are, the large cap growth, holdings that I've wanted to have over the last 5 years, where I have no problem being overweight in those guys. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I essentially have three different categories with that because my elite players, I really didn't care because it was like, listen, if guys are good, I want as many of them as I can. But then I got Andrew Luck and then I got Deshaun Watson. And so it just got to the point where, I mean, Luck wrecked a lot of my leagues. It hurt that year. And just because of the timing of it specifically, that was really tough. And so I've kind of done a 25% cap on the elite players within reason, but it's not like a hard cap. You know, if I go over for a little bit, you know, I might be looking to move a share, but it just depends. Non-elite players, I tend to go over. You know, like the guys like Van Jefferson's an example I'll give you. Van Jefferson didn't cost really anything to get, so I don't mind having 15 shares. You know, because if he ends up being the 2 in that offense or the 3, or, you know, look what he's done over the last 3 weeks, that's great. I'm plugging him into 15 lineups. So I don't mind that at all. And then when it comes to the rookie draft, if I feel that there's a player I like, where like Justin Herbert, I was all in on Justin Herbert. I got as much Herbert as I could. And I said, I'll just get, if I like a guy and I'm in on him and he hits, I'm going to get as much as I can. And then I can trade shares if I need to. So that's fine. So yeah, but typically my elite players are about 25% capped. But it's more just to diversify, right? Because running back is a little bit harder to do, but I don't use running. I don't like running backs. I don't have many running backs. So it's really more like, look at the top 8 quarterbacks. I might have 20% of each one. You know what I mean? And so to me, that's still like having an elite quarterback. It's just I have some different names. So I don't look at it as, you know, okay, I have 40% of one player, but I have 25% of an elite player at that position. So that's kind of how I feel about it. But Andrew, if you're still in more leagues than the average person. So like, do you diversify at all, or are you like, hey, if I love this guy, he's in all my leagues?
Well, so I was actually talking about this on Twitter this week. Somebody asked me that kind of question. They're like, you know, I'm in 20 leagues, right? Which isn't much, but to a lot of people, that's way too many. And for me, that's probably way too many. I don't mind the portfolio idea, but it's just not how I tend to play the game. I like to have fun and, you know, take it a little bit more easy. And I'm obviously creating content and everything like that. I've got a regular job like we all do. It's like, you know, sometimes you got to make some decisions. But for the most part, I actually kind of agree with you, Scott. When it comes to the elite players, I feel like I have fewer shares of those guys. Mostly because I always look at the cost. What's the cost of acquisition on those? The cost of that blue chip stock is high for a reason. You're going to grow. It's worth the money. It's not that I can't afford it. I would rather ride the guy like Van Jefferson or an Amon-Ra St. Brown, or, you know, these guys that are like almost nothing. Their 3rd round, 4th round picks are worth that at the beginning of the year. And then they go up to a 2nd round value and I flip them. And it's one of those, like, if I'm in 20 leagues and I've got, you know, 7 shares of Van Jefferson and he starts to pop off, I might sell one of them and be like, all right, let me get out on one. Let me get out on one here. Let me get out on one here as he's rising, and kind of, you know, minimizing my leverage, and then take a pick and a player that's lower to do the same, and kind of looking to build that team like we all do, try to build the value of that team. And every incremental value change is worth it. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't keep hardcore track of the percentages. You know, I'm not looking at the numbers too hardcore, but I think the most owned player I have, or most rostered player I have right now, I want to say is Amon-Ra St. Brown with 8 out of my 20 teams. And I just acquired him in one league and traded him in another. So it's still 8. So it's like, all right, I guess I'm still there. But I mean, that's one of those that even this week, after this week, I could probably sell him for more than I got him for, you know, because there's not going to be anybody else there. And so, yeah, I mean, it just depends on what the cost is. I always look at that.
Well, Scott, is there a point where you say like, okay, yeah, Jonathan Taylor's young, he's in a great offense, so I don't mind having as many shares as I can get. But do you have you seen a trajectory, a path? Is there some sort of marker that it's like, when we get to this point, whether it's age or seasons or carries or touches or something, that you're like, all right, at this point, I'm going to start divesting of those shares? Or is it, hey, I'm going to ride these guys out and win as much as I can?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. You know, and for me, you know, one, it's based off of the position. You know, I'll be much more strict over certain positions. Like I got CMC'd pretty good the last couple of years, and and I had him in a bunch of my PPC leagues where, was it 3 years ago now? I mean, he scored like 100 more points than like the top scoring quarterback. I mean, it was
Right.
ridiculous. I mean, it was 448 points or something like that, and the closest QB was like 350. And so he was definitely somebody that I was interested in owning in those types of leagues. So for me, I think it's so hard to I hate the injury prone thing. I hate generalizations and stuff like that, because there's certain guys that just buck that, like Derrick Henry. I mean, what was it, 3, 4, 5, 6 years? Larry Fitzgerald, 3, 4, 5, 6 years where everybody was selling him. Shit, Tom Brady 4 or 5 years ago was cooked, and now look what he's done the last couple of years. I bought him in a couple of years this year, a couple of leagues this year, and I had never bought Tom Brady. But I got offers from guys that were rebuilding where they sold them, relatively inexpensively. And I'm like, you know what? Even if I only get, this year, maybe this year and one more year, it's worth it because of what he's doing. So, for me, I think it's very situational for me. I won't have hard and fast, 30-year-old wide receiver because, Larry Fitzgerald's proved that there's certain type of dudes, like if Antonio Brown wasn't, batshit crazy, his playing style and body style and things like that is somebody, he's not a Megatron or a Julio Jones kind of guy where, he gets the crap beat out of him, because of the way that he plays. And so, he's a guy that if he wasn't, losing his mind, he's probably got 3 or 4 like highly productive years in him,
Sure.
Kind of thing. So, for me, I won't look at hard and fast. It was 30. Back when I started playing, it was 30 years old for a running back. Now it's 30 years old for a wide receiver, and it's like 25 years old for a running back.
Right.
But yeah, so I won't. Sorry, long-winded answer to your question. I don't have like a hard and fast. I'll look at touches and I'll look at historical touches. And what guys do coming off of historical touch seasons, and I might try and get out of I was lucky I didn't have any Gurley when Gurley fell off the cliff.
Me neither.
Based off of what he had. I mean, he was one of those guys that to me just had way too many touches and came into the league with issues.
With knee issues.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, if people are looking at historical touches or, maybe they go into a bad situation or a bad coaching situation or something like that, then yeah, I'll look at divesting from guys that, that might not be. I'd rather be Belichick and get out too soon rather than get out too late.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and with that, speaking of injuries, kind of going into our injury roundup here. I mean, this week is pretty wild. We always see as the season goes on, this car crash sport that we're in. Guys get hurt and guys compounding injuries, and it gets late in the season. Guys get shut down even if they maybe wouldn't earlier in the season or if the team's not competitive. And so that's where we start to kind of find some of these deeper players, these handcuffs, these backups, these third stringers, the practice squad guys that get promoted. Then you add COVID on top of that. And now it's just, I mean, Cleveland, I don't know how Cleveland's going to have a roster this week. I mean, it's pretty crazy. They're the Saturday game, so they have one less day to figure it out. So, man, it's a wild one. And Andrew, I think you made a great point earlier about this Thursday game that we can apply to the Saturday games, right?
Sure.
And that's just get whoever's playing in your lineups and figure it out as we go, right?
Yeah, if they're active, they're starting, right? I mean, this is one of those. It's almost like you can think of it like a natural disaster, right? Like we don't know what's coming, but it's not good. So let's hunker down, let's protect, let's do what we can. It may not be the right decision, and I may end up in my basement worried for no reason. But I'd rather be in my basement worried for no reason than be outside not worried at all, right? I think that's kind of where a lot of the decisions I had today on Twitter, people were like, well, should I start so-and-so? And I'm like, honestly, yes. Like I didn't have any questions about like Jackson or Roundtree or any of those guys, but it was all like, do I start Darrell Williams? And I'm like, yeah, I think you do. I wrote an article for Pro Football Network that came out today, and it was like, I could even see people starting Gore. Like the way the injuries have gone in Dynasty leagues, when you're just desperate for a running back to fill a hole, like I think Gore could be a play. And then, of course, first touchdown goes to a running back on the Chiefs. Not any of the three guys I recommended. It was Burton, the fullback, of course.
Yeah.
So it's like, but the logic still applies, right? Like put someone in your lineup. And I think the other thing that makes this it just makes it feel so crazy is that it's literally you get an alert on your phone that so-and-so is out with COVID. It's not like they were hurt and they were questionable and you had plans and you're like, well, if they don't play, I've got this guy. It's like you just get smacked in the face, like, oh, Baker Mayfield's out. Oh, so-and-so's out. And so it's so fast and furious. You're just like, I don't know how to do this. That's, I think, what makes it so tricky, more tricky than usual, is that it's not like Eckler is nursing an injury and he might miss the game. We get to build up to it. Nope, he's out. We don't know why. He's just out. It just makes this whole kind of thing, exhausting at the end of an already exhausting year. Put it that way. But yeah, I mean, Scott as a portfolio player, Scott Stevens as a portfolio player, do you even really worry too much about injuries until it comes to lineups? Like, are you really panicking at all, or is it more like we'll figure it out when we get there?
Yeah, and I'm going to, give another shout out to Scott Connor. He and I have, felt like we've shared the same brain for years as far as Dynasty goes. And I'm even in like a little private group me chat with him and another guy, Dogtown, who's in both of those Patreons. We're co-owners of a couple of teams together. And, we have some great discussions in there. And Scott has been big the last couple of years on depth. And so, we talked about, deep sleepers and things like that. And I would say Scott's specialty is probably tight ends as far as depth.
Yes.
So I was looking at my Dynasty Planet, and some of the tight ends that I have, like I've got 42% Foster Moreau, I've got 37% Tyree Jackson. I mean, and all these guys, got for absolutely free, off of waivers kind of thing. So, I think the big thing really is it's funny. My phone was blowing up all day with all these notifications, COVID notifications and things like that. And, guys are complaining in Patreon, and I got some questions as well on Twitter and in GroupMe about, guys to start. And I was with you. It was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm totally okay starting Guyton over maybe starting Pollard or, maybe starting Henderson or, whoever it is. It's like, one, I know the guy's going to play. I know he's going to get some snaps. If somebody gets hurt, he's going to get a bunch of them. He's always he's always there as a potential deep ball threat or something like that. He could get away from somebody if Keenan and Mike Williams are getting too much attention. So, take the bird in hand kind of thing. But yeah, I don't really freak out too much about injuries, because most of the leagues that I play in have some pretty deep benches, and allow me to accumulate, the depth. I will say though, I will admit, unfortunately that I haven't been as good in probably 4 or 5 leagues this year as I am in some of the other leagues. As far as, churning, moving on, as soon as I pick somebody up and maybe they pop and maybe do something for a week, then, selling them like Dearness Johnson. I had like 23 shares of him, that I got for free that I want to say that I sold like 6 or 7 of them for seconds, after his one, I think it was a Thursday night game, where he went off. I bought one of his t-shirts after he went off and then promptly sold about 6 or 8, of the 23 shares that I had, but, and then made room, for other guys. So yeah, it's not something that I worry about too much. It's something that, especially when you look at stuff like today where COVID and you're talking about playoffs, everybody's dealing with the same thing. One of my highest stakes leagues, the guy that I'm playing this week has lost Waddle. He's lost like 2 or 3 of his biggest names. I'll find it here in a second. But I mean, all of a sudden from something that was going to be potentially a close match, or maybe he was favored, now he's a massive underdog, and, all from this. So, you can't worry about it too much because there's so many people that are in the same boat. Hollywood Brown popped today, as far as, not practicing due to an illness. And so, you look at something like, you look at those types of things, and one of the guys in one of my chats was like, man, that's going to crush me. I have him in like 11 out of 18 leagues. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it is going to crush you, but, at the same time, it's, you've got to have something else there, kind of thing. And not only that, but Hollywood, I mean, he might not have LJAC, so maybe I'm not even worried about, losing Hollywood, that much. But,
who needs context, man? You don't need to add context to anything. It's all everything's in a vacuum. I lost a player. It's terrible. I love this Twitter world we're living in, right?
It is. It's crazy, But I mean, again, you can't worry about it. You can't freak out about it. Yeah, look at Guyton actually caught a touchdown. He's got 7.4 points. I look like a freaking genius, and I'm really not. But I mean.
Well, the other thing about Thursday,
and
I was going to say, you're talking about this bird in the hand on Thursdays. The other thing I've always liked about Thursdays is it gives you an idea of how aggressive you need to be on Sunday, right? Yeah, we've got Saturday games, but like there are lots of times I want to put someone in
new
on
information
Thursday,
you can use,
right? And be like, all right, well now I got 7 points from Guyton. That's more than I expected. I can be a little more conservative on Sunday, or I don't have to worry about that lineup decision because he's already locked in my lineup. Like there's a whole bunch of benefits you get anyway. And then you add on this chaos COVID storm that we're having, this COVID NATO that's coming through the bye weeks and the NFL right now in playoffs. It's like there's no reason not to at this point. I mean, the Saturday games add another layer to that, because then it's like, okay, you've got 4 different windows if you count Monday. It's like you've got all these different windows to kind of play some things out. I love it. I love the way that the end of the year always has Saturday games. It always ends up being a lot more fun. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. There's no reason to panic. Just keep playing.
No. And you bring up a great point as far as having extra intel going into the weekend, because we get so many questions and there's not enough context there, as far as, because one of the big questions is, are you an underdog or are you a favorite? So a lot of times if somebody's giving me an either or, it's like, here's your floor play, here's your ceiling play, whichever one you think you need to win your matchup, that's your play if I can't get any other context. So yeah, for you, that's a great call, knowing that, having that intel going into the weekend lets you make some decisions over the weekend that might be a coin flip that now are a lot easier for you.
Yep. 100% agree.
So all these guys, now, if you don't have a trade deadline right now, is there anyone that's not necessarily COVID, because we know that's typically a short-term thing, but are there any injuries that have come up that trigger something for you that's like, that's a buy or that's a sell? Typically it's not going to be a sell because their value takes a hit maybe, but so an example would be, they just announced a couple hours ago, TJ Hawkinson is going to be out for the season. I have 17 shares of TJ Hawkinson, and 17 shares, and that's a lot. And so obviously I don't think I'm going to be selling any at this point, but maybe there's a league where I'm competing and I can do some sort of lateral move to get me some points, something like that, throw in a pick, whatever. But does that typically, for you, or just even in this case, or any of these players, will that bring up maybe a buying opportunity for your non-playoff teams?
100%.
Or are you just not necessarily like, hey, we'll just kind of wait?
Well, I think it does for sure. And I'll put it this way too. I think with Hawkinson specifically, I've been trying to get him in a couple different places where I'm rebuilding, because I think he's having a rough year. I mean, the Lions are just a train wreck this year. Swift's been really good with an out, and I think that team has a lot of growth left in it. So Hawkinson's somebody I've been trying to get anyway. And so when that came out, I sent an offer that was like a first and a third for Hawkinson, where, the guy that he kind of wanted a first. It's his own first he gets back. He's a championship contending kind of team. So he's not going to get any points out of Hawkinson, but maybe he'd rather have the pick because he doesn't have, it's his own pick. He doesn't have it.
Sure.
And it's one of those two where like, well, do I charge? He's got other tight ends. Like he doesn't need another guy, and I don't have anyone to give him. So there was actually in a different league where I'm in a contending mode, I was like, well, I got Waller. Maybe I go to try to get Hawkinson, and I just, stack up a little behind me for next year. But a trade went down. It was Hawkinson and a second, or 23 second, for Andrews and a 22 fourth. And I was like, see, that's the kind of move that I think, I would much rather have Andrews myself.
Yeah, me too.
I think again, it's a 23 second, which you could argue there's a lot of value in the 23 class, and maybe those picks are still ascending and whatever. But like a 22 fourth and Andrews is by far the better option. And it's going to give you a ton of leeway in this weird world that we're seeing. I think Andrews is by far the better pick. So if you can do something like that, I'm fine selling Hawkinson to kind of upgrade. But for the most part, I'm buying Hawkinson. The other name, Stevens, we can get into some of this stuff too. But I guess the other guy I was thinking about even was Jalen Hurts, right? Like now he might not play this week. He's splitting snaps with Minshew. There's been talk all year about whether or not he's even going to be the starter next year. So like some of those guys that have had this cloud, like Hawkinson too, has missed time. He's kind of murky. Like some of that stuff, I like to strike then when it's like 3 weeks in and the manager of that guy might just be like, you know what, I'm done. I'm out. Like that's kind of when I like to strike, because when it's a first injury and it's like a first notice of it, I feel like people aren't as willing to pull the trigger, but maybe that's just me. So that's kind of where my thoughts land.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I actually, and it's easy, when you have this many leagues, I actually look at doing both. So,
Yeah.
Leagues where maybe I'm out of it and I've got a guy like Kelsey, and the guy that had Hawk is contending, I'll send him Kelsey for Hawk and a first, kind of thing. And
I'm gonna do that right now.
But then other way around, too, if I've got a lot of Hawk like Sidlow does, then you look at, you know what, especially if I'm competing, can I get Gesicki straight up? Can I get Gesicki, can I get Gesicki and a third, something along those lines, because to me, especially when you get out of, those top 4 or 5 guys, when you get away from Pitts, Andrews, Kelsey, Kittle,
Waller-ish.
Waller-ish. Yeah. That's why I got so much Foster Moreau.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you get out of that top 4, that top 5, a lot of those guys are super similar, and I really, really liked Hawk this year because I thought Detroit was going to be behind all the time. They're going to be chucking it all the time. And that was going to be Goff's security blanket. But I saw a bunch of people picking up, like the backup tight ends there with Detroit. And I'm like, go ahead and waste that roster spot because one, Hawk wasn't getting targets, the last handful of weeks when he was playing, and two, Goff isn't, it is what he is, and Dennis Green's, he is what we thought he was,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And he's not he's not getting garbage time. He's not getting, that kind of stuff, the negative game script, kind of stuff to help out. So, for me, I would have no problem pivoting down to which, with somebody that could be actually pretty even as far as production, like with a Gesicki, or Fant or something like that from Hawk. If, especially if somebody's rebuilding and they think that Hawk is on the same level or better than a Fant or a Gesicki, and I can get a little juice back on top, even though Hawk is toast for the year, if he still has that name cash, then like I said, I'll kind of work both sides of, trying to buy and sell him.
That makes perfect sense to me. I'm certainly doing that a lot on my own. I want to ask you this question specifically because there's just been so much the 22 class is terrible and the 23 class is amazing and all, and honestly, it's kind of like you always get that like every year. It's like every year there's a class that's amazing, whatever.
21 was amazing until it wasn't.
Yeah, right. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
So to me, this is something that I don't know. People kind of go either way. So you might say, no, Sidlow, you're an idiot. But to me, there's time value, and the 23 picks aren't like great. If I can get a 23 pick, fine, cool. But I'm perfectly fine grabbing those 22 picks if people are just throwing them away, essentially. If they're not valuing them, fine, I'll take them. Because then I can put some production behind it, or as we get closer to the draft, there's going to be players that pop. There's going to be somebody that lands somewhere. There's going to be some, buzz on some player. And those picks are always going to increase in value. So I'm willing to take those 22 picks and figure it out later. And I know I have more time to get those 23 picks, in the future if I want or need. And so I'm more than willing to get those 22 picks now in a lot of leagues. And I've found myself accumulating more than I typically do. it's still. I just think I can do something with them now, or
it's always
draft
good.
time. So
always good
why
to
not? Why not
zags,
do it?
right? Yeah, it's always good to like go the
why
other
not do it?
Yeah.
You know, regardless of the class, whatever, I'm not even worried about that right now. It's just more, let me get these picks and then figure it out. But have you seen in your leagues that people are more willing to part with 22s, and have you taken advantage, or is that not even a thought process for you?
Well, I mean, I can jump in here. I think that there is a definite value in some of those. If everybody, like you were saying, if you're zigging when everyone's zagging, you can sometimes capitalize on the market. Right. And then the value becomes, I've got all the picks. And at some point, even as bad as this, quote unquote, as bad as this class is going to be, right, come March, it's going to be amazing. And there's going to be 7 guys that everybody wants. You know what I mean? Like it happens every year.
Right.
And then even then, and I always use this because it burned me so bad. But like then there's always that N'Keal Harry, right? Like there's that guy that's a sure thing. He's going to a great opportunity on a great team. It's a slam dunk. He's better than DK Metcalf, no doubt. Let's take N'Keal Harry at 101. And then 6 months later, you're like, that was a terrible pick. And it's only 6 months that you're already realizing it, right? So and then there's Hakeem Butler. Remember him? Andy Isabella, Paris Campbell. Like there's so many more busts than anything else. So, and I think, Scott, we've talked about this almost ad nauseum at this point. I love collecting the picks because they're not going to descend in value. And then when you get on the clock, trade them for a player that you like. You don't have to make the pick. I think a lot of times, I think this is just a casual mindset that people have with this game. Is it like, oh, I've got 8 picks. I need to find room in my roster for 8 players. No, you don't. Like you don't need to worry about that. Like that decision doesn't need to be made if ever. Like you could literally trade everything. And it goes the other way too. Like there are plenty of times. There's a couple leagues where I think one league I've only got 1 4th round pick and 23 left. Right, where I've sent them all. I'm contending. I'm like, I don't care. Take it. I need the points. Right. I'm putting all of that money in my bank account right now. I'm taking it out of every investment portfolio I've got. I need that liquidity. Give me that cash. I'm going to go make a run to the bank. I'm going to make it happen. And then come off season, I'll start trading things away again, getting picks back, investing in different places. So it kind of comes back to that portfolio mindset. And again, I'm not an investor. I'm not a broker like you, Scott. I'm not a 50 league guy. It's just not how my mind works. But it kind of is, right? Like I think that's the best way to play this game is to kind of have your mindset on the whole picture. And I think too, each league is its own market. Each league is its own unique group of people that have their own mindsets. We were talking before we started how there are some leagues where guys just won't trade out of principle, or they don't ever make a move. And it's like, well, that's actually vital information to be like, all right, I'm not going to trade with him. And there was one league I was in a couple of years ago where it was my second year in the league. And this guy that always, every time I reached out, he goes, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. He reaches out to me and I just go, okay, well, what are you looking for? You know, like, I'm not going to be a jerk back and be like, no, I'm not interested. And what he wanted was ridiculous to the point where I was like, well, that's a lot. I'm not going to begin. I'm not going to be a jerk, even though it was primed for it. I'm like, that's a little more than I'm willing to pay for that player. I, appreciate the offer. Reach out anytime. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to shut it down. But it was funny. Nobody traded with him because he had blown everybody off. His values were so different. And he never made a trade. And I was like, this is where I think the players come into play, where it's like there's a mind game there. You know what I mean? So again, kind of back to the original point. If everybody's hating the 22 picks, I'm with you, Scott. Give them all. I'll take them all. Put them all on my team. I don't mind.
Yeah, it's funny, and that's also the nice thing about being in both of the different, Patreons that we're in is okay, yeah, between the two Scotts here, we've got 100. Between the three of us, we got 120, 125 leagues. Well, those Patreons, you add another, 600 to 1,000 leagues, yep. and you get this narrative like this summer, and it worked out great for me at the beginning of the year. But this summer, all the talk, everything just got way too negative on Zeke, for me. The hate had gone too far. So you talk about, people hate the 22 picks, okay, give them to me. People hate Zeke. Okay. I mean, I was getting Zeke dirt cheap. I mean, I was getting him late in startups. I was getting him dirt cheap in trades. Everybody was off of Zeke. All right. I mean, and, like I said, it worked out great, the first, 5-6 games of the year. Now he's banged up. But, I mean, I think a contrarian view, is a great way, to play this because, it's, for instance, one of my PPC leagues, I felt like I was overweight in CMC a couple seasons ago. and I traded CMC in one of my PPC leagues for Swift and a 23 first. And I mean, then all of a sudden it looked great this year, when CMC went down and Swift was doing so well, and I had that pick in the book. So, again, if the value gets so high for somebody, you almost have to cash out, especially even if it's somebody that you totally dig. I mean, if you're getting an absolute haul, for somebody, if somebody's offering you, 3-4 plus first value for a player, other than maybe Mahomes, I don't really, or Herbert, or I don't care really who it is. That's a boatload of value for somebody that could, tear an ACL next week, and to your point, about picks, they're not going to depreciate in value until I use them. They're going to ascend in value until I actually select a player with them. And so, so playing that contrarian way, I think is very smart on both sides. If you think that somebody is valued that's just, through the roof, sell a couple. And if somebody is, I think is undervalued and the hate has gotten too hard on, then buy them. And so, and that's the great thing with the portfolio approach. And like I said, with the Patreons that are in, we get such a good pulse on the market and where the hate is that, it's easy to kind of make our own moves and make our own pivots.
And to be honest too, I think one thing that I want to say gets a little overlooked or oversimplified is that there isn't a single dollar value, right? Each market is so different. And we talk about this all the time, but it's not like Pat Mahomes is worth 8 units or like 800 points or whatever, whatever generic term you want to call it. That's not true across leagues. That's different, right? Like you can't say that. It's not always that way. And then I think what ends up happening, again, this is the nature of the beast. And the thing we've all signed up for is like you put a trade on Twitter and it's like in a vacuum, this player is worth X because it's worth this in this one trade. Okay, but if I did that the other way and I took that other side against this, like, well, now it's different. The context changes. Well, okay, so you can't, nothing is in a vacuum. We're all playing this game with other living human beings that are all making decisions. And I say this to so many people, it almost gets exhausting. It's like, if we all valued players the same way, I would hate this. Like, this would be terrifying. I would not want to play this game. The fact that we value players differently makes it fun. So that's why when I get those ridiculous offers, I end up saying something like, we value these players too differently. I don't think it's going to work. It's not like you're wrong. Like, man, there's no way you can get that. I guarantee you somebody out there has gotten that, and that's why they're offering it. Or they feel like it's worth that. I'm not going to crap on that. But again, it all comes down to that. What kind of risk are you willing to take? And to kind of bring it back to injuries too. I mean, injuries are something that happen. It's part of the game. You can't get away from it. So I think in Dynasty, especially if you kind of lean into it sometimes, and I did this a little bit last year with CMC. I traded Henry and somebody else for CMC and somebody else because I was out of it. And Henry was dominating. And I was like, I don't know if Henry has the longevity. I think CMC is going to come back and dominate next year. Didn't pan out, right? But in my head, I was like, that's worth the risk to me. Like, Henry is playing now. I don't have a chance in this league. Let me get to another guy that's similar. And it's always like, well, where can I find that injury dip? Now, I do still want to preface this a little bit. Buying the injury dip is risk. That's all you're doing is you're buying risk at a lower potentially anyway, a lower price point. And so you have to be aware when you're buying that injury dip, you are taking on risk. And I think that's something that also gets ignored in this discussion. Anytime you're talking dynasty trades or valuation at all, is like, there's so much risk with every player on the field, but adding extra risk sometimes makes no sense for your team. So again, like, all of this stuff makes it such a fun game because it's not like there's one way to do it, and when you've got 50 leagues or, whatever, you can play it different across all of your leagues too, which is just like, I love doing that with my own. And like in some leagues, I'm super conservative and letting everybody else trade and go nuts. And I'm just kind of like staying the course. And others, I'm the one stirring the pot and going crazy, doing moves all the time. And like, I just love that about this. Like, it's such a fun game for that exact reason. Injuries are a part of it. And as much as we hate to say it, COVID is a part of it. Like this whole thing, we've known this was coming. Everybody wants to act like this is a surprise. All year, we got lucky to get 14 weeks of almost entirely free football. We did not have an outbreak at all, and we didn't have to move any games. Remember last year we had Tuesday games and Wednesday games? We haven't had to do any of that. We've been blessed. And to then have people go and like curse it for happening, it's like, bro, what did you think we signed up for? Like, there's a pandemic. We're actually able to watch football. We're going to games again. Calm down. It's a win. So it's all fun. It's all fun and games. That's what I always like. That's just for fun. Come on.
Well, and you bring up a good point though about, you're taking on risk, and that's why, when Scott brought up, all of his shares of Hawk, it's like, you know what? If you really like Hawk, you can keep the number of shares that you have, but situationally move them. You
Yeah,
know, sell a couple
exactly.
for, what feels like a potential lateral pivot or something like that, or, you know, like I said, downgrade, from a Kelsey to a Hawk on teams that aren't competing. You can do both. You can buy, you can sell. You can send, Kelsey to somebody that is contending where you're not, and get Hawk back with some juice, and still maintain your market share of Hawk, or players that you like, whoever it is. So even though you might, be buying that risk, if you're selling it off elsewhere, then you're, what we call in the investment business is you're kind of smoothing out the bumps,
Yep.
kind of thing. And that's exactly what you're doing by buying and selling in different areas.
Yep. It's a way to play.
Beautiful. So, Scott, what are you doing with your teams now that when you're out of the playoffs? Obviously, one of the things we do is we buy some of these risks, right? We buy some of these players for next year. What are you doing with teams, though? Are you still working the wire? Are you still obviously, if there's no trade deadline, you can make those trades. But let's say there is a trade deadline and you're out of it. You're non-playoff team. I mean, for me, I focus more now on my playoff teams because I'm going to go maximize my money, right? But for the teams that are out of it, are you taking your foot off the gas? Are you still as diligent on the waiver wire? Are you paying as much attention? Do you do anything different than you would do during the season? Maybe you were already a rebuilding team and you weren't planning on being in the playoffs. Any of those scenarios, does anything change for you? Is there anything different now that we're in the playoffs and you're not?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for me, position wise, I'll look at different positions differently. And so what I'll do is like wide receivers that, maybe they're at the end of their contract, going to be a free agent or something like that. Maybe it's one of those guys where maybe you're hoping for like a third year breakout, the old third year breakout, which, we haven't, I mean, how long has it been since we talked about the third year wide receiver breakout, kind of thing? Because so many of these young kids have just smashed when they come out now that it's like, 3 years, nobody's even waiting 3 years. Nobody's buying 3 years. Nobody's buying 3-year breakouts or anything like that. So I'll look at those where, where guys might be going to different situations or maybe be getting in better situations. And I'll definitely look at, taking those guys on while I'm dumping guys that I think might be cooked, dumping a T.Y. Hilton or dumping a N'Keal Harry or dumping a, whatever, somebody that, has no value or this offseason could have less than no value. Then I'll take on some of these younger guys, that you might, like I said, you might be looking for a 3 or 4 year breakout kind of thing that, their contract's up and they're going. Running backs, when I look at running backs, this is, where you go super deep on the depth chart, and you get your Jared Dokes and you get your Gores and you get, those kinds of guys that are hanging out there, your Duke Johnsons. I mean, shoot, I picked up so much Duke Johnson today now that the entire running back room for Miami is on COVID. Let's see. Oh, Dynasty Planet reset on me. I was looking at it a little bit ago, but I think I had like 21 Duke Johnson shares,
Yep.
So yeah, I'll do different things like that. Maybe on the shorter benches, like our 99 Problems League, where it's a 24-man roster, that's where you can get guys like Kine and Guanu, or whatever that people haven't had room for because we only have 2 IR spots and 24 roster spots. And I think we still play a friggin' defense and kicker in that league. So it's like those guys, if you have 4 or 5 guys on IR, you don't have room to keep a Kine. And so, that's where I'll go through and I'll, on teams that aren't competing is I'll look for guys like that might get a little pop in camp and stuff like that. Young guys that, maybe Madison. I don't know off the top of my head, what Madison's contract looks like, but maybe he's going to be a free agent next year or something like that after they paid Cook. Where okay, then Keeney is going to be the backup now, and he's going to have Madison value if something happens to Cook. So
sure.
Those are the kinds of things I'll look at it situationally with their contracts, with their team situation, coaching situations, that kind of stuff, depending upon the position.
Yeah, I'm right in line with you there. It makes sense. I kind of, they're on the back burner, but they're not out of mind, so I'm going to focus on my playoff teams, but then, the waivers are going to go through whatever Wednesday, Thursday. Now I'm jumping into those rosters and I'm looking for the opportunities there. I also keep a list of which, cause I don't remember which leagues trade deadline passed and all that stuff. So I keep a list and then I'll go through those leagues and figure out, do I have, a need for, do I have assets to go buy a Hawkinson, or do I have a Kelsey that I can trade, type of thing. So yeah, that kind of helps me keep track of it. Andrew, I know we talked about somebody in the industry earlier making a statement on this once you're out of the playoffs, but what do you tend to do with those dynasty rosters when you're out?
Well, I think, again, we are on Dynasty Junkies. We are all Dynasty Junkies ourselves. We have tons of Dynasty leagues. There is no stopping. The only thing that stops is the trading in some leagues. But waivers never stop. Like, I don't understand why you would ever stop. Like, there's a home Dynasty league that I'm a co-commissioner of with a bunch of guys that are, kind of casual players. And there was, I think after our first full season doing Dynasty, we had our rookie draft. And somebody actually asked in the chat, like, okay, so waivers are off until August, right? And I was like, no, just no. That's no. They're always on. Like we go to weekly waivers in the off season just because, again, people have lives.
Yeah,
and,
that's fair.
Blurbs happen. And I'm like, I don't mind that, right? Like, I don't mind switching that for that. But like, even then, like, and I think most leagues do that in the off season, which I think is the right way to do it. But you should never stop. Why are you giving up? Like, do you really want to be in a league of people that give up halfway through the year? It's a dynasty league. You want this to be around for 3 to 5 years. And here after 14 weeks, people are like, nah. Oh, are you kidding me? Also, I think we always talk about this, but dynasty players, while we look at the long game, are the most overreactive bunch I've ever seen in my life. You get one guy like Jalen Guyton gets a touchdown tonight. He's going to be 99% owned. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are people that are going to be like, he's the next KJ Osborne. And I'm like, oh my God. But if he's available in a league, I'm picking him up. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how this works anymore. But like, we always want that next big thing. And it kind of ties into what we talked about earlier. It's like, everybody wants that free asset that becomes gold, right? We're all looking to just find gold and then our hills. You know what I'm saying?
Penny
like,
stocks.
let me go find a penny stock that is going to end up turning into $50. You can go buy your $500 Jonathan Taylor. I want to go find 500 penny stocks. Not
Right.
only because I don't think they're all going to become gold, but that's more fun for me. I like doing that more, right? And there are definitely players that are in a ton of leagues, or maybe 6 is too many for them, and they don't have time to keep track of all of it. So they just consolidate all their assets and they get the big players and they don't look at waivers. I get that too. Like, there's no wrong way to play this. And I think whenever somebody says the wrong way is X or the right way is X, I'm always like, I disagree. Like when people say about getting rid of kickers and defenses, I think there are definitely some leagues where that makes sense to do. But then there are others where I love having kickers involved because it makes it kind of different. I'm just saying, like, every league is unique. Like, there are 10-team leagues. There are 16-team leagues. Like, you do you, boo. You know what I'm saying? Like, go find the league that makes you happy. Like, I'm not here to crap on your cornflakes, right? And I think that's ultimately what that comes out like when people say, and again, I'm not mentioning names, but when people who are big in the industry come out and say things like, if you're out of the playoffs in Dynasty, you shouldn't be using the waiver wire. I'm like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, no,
check your rules.
right.
If it's allowed, then
right.
you're allowed. Like, I don't know. I don't get the uproar, but all week on Twitter, that's all we're hearing about. I love it.
Right.
Can't get away from it.
It's apparently a hot topic currently, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me if your league has rules on it, then that's what they're there for. I mean, if I'm in some leagues where it's like, hey, the waivers turn off for the non-playoff teams, whatever, like, okay, fine, whatever. I mean, that's not how I think it should be for Dynasty, but whatever. I sign up for the league. That's the rules. I mean, I probably won't be in that league very long. But I mean, if that's what it is, that's what it is. I mean, what are you gonna do? But otherwise, I have no idea why you would stop doing anything ever in Dynasty. It's why you're in a Dynasty league. It's for those of us who don't want to stop. I mean, honestly, that's half the fun. Like, for me, I used to be in so many redraft leagues, and it was like, you start 0-6, and it's like, well, you're done. Your season. I mean, you did all that draft prep, and you killed your draft, and you made some good trade, and you found the waiver wire gem, and then you had horrible luck, and now your season's over. Well, that's why I play Dynasty, because my season's not over. I can turn those pieces into other assets and do that. I mean, that's why we play the game. So yeah, I completely agree. I don't understand where that mindset comes from. But yeah, you should never stop. Are you gonna maybe pay a little less attention to a couple of those leagues? Sure. It just happens inevitably. I mean, we're human. We're gonna lean towards the shiny object, but it's
only so many hours in a day.
Strange.
Right? Like at some point you have to kind of throw things overboard. And after 14 weeks, I'm actually excited as hell that I've got 5 teams on a bye. Like I'm first round. I'm like, that's 5 lineups. I don't have to set. That's 5 waivers. I don't really have to care about. You know what I mean? Because like some of those weeks when you're looking at lineups, I'm like, I gotta run waivers because I don't know who's gonna get hurt. I mean, I might need somebody. Now it's like I'm looking to next week. I can let waivers go and see what happens after. It's like, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you're in 50 leagues, it's even more like exciting in a way. There are a couple leagues I'm out of the playoffs, and I'm like, oh, thank God. You know what I mean? Like the grind is sort of coming to an end.
Except for those leagues that have the consolation bracket where you can get a 213 pick. Yep. It's like there is no stopping. I mean, literally.
But that actually goes perfectly to the topic. Like if your league is doing that, it's to activate this. It's to make things active. And Scott, we were talking about this. Like if your league has weekly payouts and things like that, like if there's something to play for it. Like what are you doing? You know what I mean? But like if I'm in a league where the consolation bracket is for bragging rights and means nothing, you guys have it. Yeah. I'm good. I'm going to take a break. It's not a big deal, especially in redraft. My God, like who cares in redraft? You know what I mean? Like Scott was saying, if I'm 0-9, I see a league. I don't care about you anymore. No offense. You know what I mean? Like, but you have my money. I'm out. Like I don't care. But if I want to, I'm allowed to. There's the difference, right? But yeah, I'm with you.
No doubt. All right. Is there anything else you guys want to try to?
Well, there's only one other point I wanted to get into, and I don't think it's a big one, but it's on the same topic of if you're out of the playoffs, keep going. I've written a couple articles recently for Fantasy Pros to talk about that, where it's like, don't stop. Like your dynasty roster needs you right now. This is actually the time of year, and this sort of hits on what we said earlier. If everyone's stopping, you can gain some leverage, right? If your league is slowing down, now is the time you might be able to be like, all right, well, they're not paying attention. I can snag somebody, right? Like, and that happens in so many leagues where I go to look at the waivers and I'm like, oh, I still have so-and-so rostered. Like, oh, I totally forgot about that. I don't need that guy. Like, I've got Jalen Samuels on a team. He's for Houston now. I don't even care about this guy. And I just go look at who ad drop and I, find out something like, oh, that guy's available. Sure, why not? Let's have some fun. You know what I mean? Like there's plenty of those leagues. And so I just want to say, like, even if you're out of it, others in your league might be lazy here too. They might be falling asleep at the wheel. Now might be a good time just to go check. You don't have to do anything, but just go look at the waivers, go look at ad drops, go take a look at who's on your, available players section of your league and just, take a peek. And then depending on who you like, I always do this. It may be portfolio guys. Maybe you do this too, but like I picked up a share of Andy Isabella yesterday and I was like, I don't have him anywhere. I don't think he's worth much, but like if this Hopkins injury becomes big and Green gets hurt again, I mean, maybe there's a chance he shows up in the playoffs and I could use him. It's on a rebuild team. So maybe he gets traded. You know what I mean? Like I don't have any shares. I'm like, I kind of want to have one somewhere. So like, that's part of it too. Is it like, it's fun. The whole point of it is to have fun. Like I keep going back to.
Yep.
Do what makes you happy.
For sure. Scott, any final thoughts on playoff strategies, whether you're in, out, any final words on that?
No, I mean, I would say the only thing, when you're looking at this stuff and you get to this point, don't get cute. You get a lot of questions, where people are, thinking about sitting certain guys because of a matchup or something like that. And then all of a sudden, they wind up going off. And it's like, you know what? You're in the playoffs for a reason. You got to where you are because of those guys.
Go with who got you there.
Yeah. Don't get too cute. When you get into the playoffs, don't think that picking up, a certain player to start over, somebody that got you there just because he's a little banged up is the way to go. It's one of those things. It's kind of like, when I have discussions with my clients, it's like, look, we're going to structure your portfolio so you sleep easy at night. We're going to structure your investments so you can sleep easy at night. You know what? If you start, a certain stud over a wide receiver 3 on a team, and the wide receiver 3 goes off, okay, that's
you made
what's
the
going
right
to happen.
decision.
It's fantasy football. If you've been doing this long enough, that shit's happened to you a lot. So you know what? Put the checkbox in next to the guy that got you where you are, and don't try and overthink stuff, because as soon as you do, that's when Amari Cooper sucks on the road, kind of thing. And so they're playing the Giants on the road. So I'm going to sit Amari Cooper, and I'm going to start somebody off, and then Cooper goes for 8, 120, and 2, and it's like, dude, it's the Giants. Yeah, he's on the road, but it's the Giants, man. So start his ass, So yeah, don't get too cute. Don't overthink it.
That always goes back to the context answer. When somebody, I've had people that DM me or something, should I bench Waddle this week? And I'm like, for who? Like, because obviously that matters. Like, you're not gonna bench Waddle for Jalen Guyton maybe, but I'm sure as hell benching Waddle for Justin Jefferson. You know what I mean? Like, it's all a spectrum. You know what I mean? And I think the don't sit your studs mentality is always what I've had, and that's kind of come to play a little bit this year. Like earlier in the season, I played Allen Robinson more than I probably should have. Right? I'm like, this is the week he's going to happen. In week 3, it didn't happen. In week 4, it didn't happen.
I could have told you that.
I know, but he's one of those. He was like a wide receiver 3 on a team. You know what I mean? Like, he was my third best wide receiver.
I get it.
But then it gets like, okay, we've got enough data to make a different decision. You know what I mean? But I'm not sitting guys like Hopkins who are hurt unless he's out. Of course, then I'm sitting him. But yeah, I'm right there with you, Scott. Like, there's sometimes where I feel like people tinker a little too much. It's like, just man, take a step back, take a deep breath, go for a walk. You're going to be okay. You don't need to play with your lineup right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be fine.
Just make the right decision, and that you did what you could control. I mean, that's all you can control.
Yep.
So
exactly.
100% agree.
All right, guys. And with that, we're on a good timeline here to finish this out with our Find Me a Trade. We have this trade is from, let me see if I can
pull it up. I got it up here.
Can you? All right.
This was a super fun exercise. Yeah, perfect. I really enjoyed this. This was a fun little exercise, looking at a totally different league, went in and looked at the settings, looked at the teams that were competing and weren't. But it's like Fantasy Addict or Trade Addicts 9 is the league. And if we're allowed to say that, sorry if we're not.
Oh, for sure.
You are, absolutely.
Proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP Network, if you will. And
excellent.
We will. Yeah.
No, but it was awesome. I liked it.
Intro the team, though, Sidlow. Intro the team a little bit.
All right. So this is a TA league, and so it's 12-team PPR, super flex, 1.75 tight end premium with return yards, 32-man rosters, 4-man taxi, and it is a start 10. It's essentially a flex league, as I call them, where you have 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 receiver, 1 tight end, and then you have your 5 flex and a super flex. So essentially a flex league here. The team that we're looking at here is Tenacious D, and the team is 13-1 and second in points. So this is one of those, we try to get a mix and a variation. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, looking at different, a lot of rebuilds, a lot of guys in the middle. This is one of those contenders that is, hey, what's this final piece here that will put me over the edge and get me that championship? And sometimes that's hard. And that's the best, the best thing you could do is get a different set of eyes on it, and just different theory, right? We all do things differently. We all think differently. And so, what can we come up with here? Now, the one thing we don't know, obviously, is some of the guys in the league and, whatever like that. So sometimes that's where you get into, well, yeah, listen, I've already talked to that guy 15 times about that player, and it's not going to happen. Well, I understand, but we got to try to come up with something here to see if maybe it'll, knock something loose and make something happen. So the roster is quarterback wise.
While you're pulling that up, I just want to say shout out for them not having a trade deadline.
Oh, Trade Addicts doesn't have a deadline.
I get it. I mean, the name kind of implies it, but
yes,
I still love that.
Okay, so quarterbacks, we have Tom Brady, Jalen Hurts, Taylor Heineke, Ben Roethlisberger. So you've got, obviously, Brady's on a tear. Hurts is a great two, but he's hurt right now, so we don't know if he's necessarily playing. So if he has to move over to Ben there or Taylor Heineke, that could be a little bit iffy. So I did consider quarterbacks in his move here, but they're already aging as it is. So kind of how he likes to play it. Tight end wise, Zach Ertz, Kyle Pitts. So not a lot of depth to work with there, but pretty much two guys you're starting in this format. Running backs, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette, Deontay Foreman, Devontae Freeman, Royce Freeman, Jordan Howard, Godwin Igwebuike, Phillip Lindsay, Elijah Mitchell, Adrian Peterson. Lots of names in there that are guys that you could have plugged in at any point this season and gotten some pretty good points out of. Maybe not every week, maybe not for multiple weeks, but a lot of 1 or 2 week fill-ins there that get you some nice points. And then wide receiver, Robbie Anderson, Cole Beasley, Braxton Berrios, Marquez Callaway, Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, who's out, Julio Jones, who's back, Byron Pringle, Josh Reynolds, and a couple of other bench guys. Now he does have A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry on IR, and Kadarius Toney on the taxi squad. So for me, those are definitely a couple things that I considered, because we want to move guys that aren't scoring us points and get guys that are going to put points in our lineup here to win the championship. So he says the team is 13-1, second in points, has a bye this week, but feels like it's fading a bit down the stretch. Scoring is down, and was just fortunate to play enough weaker teams at the end that it got him the bye. Lost Henry and CMC, which he traded for Fournette and Elijah Mitchell, which is interesting. And then A.J. Brown is obviously out, and now Hopkins is out. So it looks like he was actually pretty stacked here, and just kind of losing starters every week. Pretty light at wide receiver, but you do only need to start one minimum. And so just looking for suggestions to fortify the team, or just that extra piece to get over the hump. So Andrew, what are you thinking here? What are your thoughts on the roster, and what did you look to do?
Well, so I think you're hitting the nail on the head here. If you're 13-1 and you're going for the title, you need points more than you need value. You need production value more than you need trade value, right? Like there's all this talk that we always have, I need points now. I don't mind about points later. That doesn't mean you sacrifice points later for nothing. You still get the value on it. But I think too, the way that this team is built with some of the injuries that have happened and some of the COVID restrictions. I mean, this is a perfect week to have a bye week. Like I said earlier, it's man, like to not have to set a lineup on this league has got to feel good. You know what I mean? But I think we're all going to be going the same kind of direction. So I don't want to, spend too long on this. But my idea was like, well, moving A.J. Brown, I think makes the most sense. I think there's still a ton of name value with that guy. I think you can still get a good value for him. And you can get a stud back for him in most cases. And then I'm also a little bit down on Barkley. I feel like you were talking about it a little bit earlier, Scott Stevens, where it's like, Barkley plus a piece for Eckler or something. Like that's a nuts trade that I think would be bonkers, except that makes perfect sense now. Like that's just where things have gone. You know what I mean? Like if you told me that a year ago, I'd be like, are you serious? But no, that's how risky Barkley is. So I thought, well, what if you traded both of those to the team named Suki, which I'm not going to get into that, but it's just a funny name, or Justin Jefferson, Michael Carter, and then they have a couple 22 seconds, it looked like. So my thought then is obviously A.J. Brown to Justin Jefferson is an upgrade. Barkley to Carter is a downgrade, but I'm not sure how much, because Carter's younger and on an offense that might be going up, and Barkley's on the Giants, and who knows. And then you get a second on there too, just to be like, still gives me a little bit of future value, so you're not giving it all away. But I mean, Justin Jefferson slots in nicely to this team. It really makes you a little bit more stud heavy. I love having studs going into the playoffs where you don't have to make decisions. Who am I going to start? I'm starting Justin Jefferson. That's not a question. So it just takes one fewer decision of my week. I don't have to worry about it. With AJ Brown being in your IR, you're not getting any points, and Jefferson seems close enough to, if not higher than AJ Brown would be on a healthy week. It helps your team now too. So that's kind of where my head was at. So you still stay young, you're getting a little bit younger and still getting points, getting rid of some potentially declining assets and making a championship run. So that was kind of where I thought. What do you think about that one, Sidlow?
Yeah, I mean that's big time. I love it. I would probably make that trade if I could. Wasn't the biggest Michael Carter fan, but definitely has the opportunity in that backfield. And
well, he's just coming off an injury, so he's kind of under the radar. You know what I mean? There's a potential that people won't like him that much. Yep,
for sure. And if you can get Justin Jefferson, I mean the move there for me. I mean, I love AJ Brown. And it's probably too emotional for me because I was all in on him, as a rookie, and everybody freaking out about the landing spot, and I stuck with him and it paid off. And it's like, so I kind of have that emotional attachment, but I still love AJ Brown. But if I'm getting Justin Jefferson, I'm not worried about it.
You
right?
Make it work. Yeah.
Yes. In that case for sure, especially the volume he's getting now with Thielen out. And who knows if Thielen comes back. Sometimes those ankle injuries can last a few weeks. So, yeah, I mean, Jefferson's going to get you a ton of points. And then Carter can probably plug in for you too. Not to mention, if you grab a second, you could also use that even this year because there's no trade deadline. So if you get into an arms race, with another team, now all of a sudden you have the assets to make that work.
Yep. That was kind of my thinking. And I think too, the Michael Carter has been injured, and maybe, Suki's looking at this like, hey, you know what, Michael Carter, I don't think he's going to be anything. Justin Jefferson might get more, but he's been kind of overshadowed a little bit lately. I think this time last year, he was Dynasty wide receiver 1, all this hype up about him, and he's probably still worth something around there. But, Jamar Chase has come on strong and kind of kicked Justin Jefferson off the top pedestal in a sense. So maybe there's, some recency bias against Jefferson in a way. So I don't know. I thought about that. But Stevens, what did you think about that trade? And then maybe if you want to go into yours even from there, we can kind of pivot then.
Yeah, you know what? I love it. It's been so difficult, recently, to do big boy trades. You don't see, big names for big names, very often, and even to the point where that you don't, because anytime one goes down in a league, everybody comments on it in GroupMe. It's like, oh, big boy trade, oh, big, right. And so I love the idea for a couple of reasons. One, I've been a little bit off of AJ Brown. I loved him as well, but especially when they lost Henry, and if they wind up losing Henry longer term kind of thing, I think a big part of AJ Brown's success was due to Henry and the offense that he was in and all that kind of stuff. And I think we've seen some chinks in Tanny's armor, since then. And then AJ Brown, as much as he adores Julio Jones, you can almost see why now, because the dude literally doesn't practice all week. Then he'll come in and play. Then he'll get hurt during the game. Then he'll come back in and play some more. And so, it feels like to me that you're removing a lot of risk from this roster, moving both AJ Brown and Barkley. You're still getting some, some name cash with both of them. And so even though I was not a Michael Carter guy before, I agree with you. I think you're able to get him since of what he's coming off of, and the fact that the Jets have been crap on a cracker all year. Yep. I think you're getting some solid value for somebody that might be a little down right now. So you're getting a couple starters, because I think everything that I've heard is Carter's going to play this week. So you're getting a couple starters for a couple guys that you might not be able to start. Next week, definitely probably won't be. You're not going to be starting AJ Brown next week. Barkley, I haven't looked next week to see who the Giants are playing, but I've actually benched Barkley in a couple leagues this week. Playing the Cowboys. So seriously, think about this. 2 years ago, would you have ever thought about benching Barkley? No matter who the hell he was, he could have been playing the '85 Bears defense, and nobody was benching Barkley.
No chance.
And I'm benching Barkley in a couple of leagues because of who he's playing and the offense that he's on. So, I thought this was a great way to kind of leverage some name cash and get a couple of solid starters.
Before you go into yours, I meant to mention this earlier. The Suki is the 7th seed. Like they just missed the playoffs. Yeah, and so if I'm the 7th seed, if I'm in the middle, that sucks. There's nothing worse than being in the middle. But if I'm looking at this trade as a middle team, like, yeah, okay, I'm losing Justin Jefferson, but I'm getting AJ Brown and Barkley. And there's some thought process. If I'm in the middle and I need to go a little bit over and like kind of get in next year, AJ Brown is going to be great next year. I'm not worried about that. Barkley could very well be Barkley and the great Barkley again next year. Like there's a lot of upside with it on that side. And I mean, again, you're losing Carter, you're losing a second, but you're in the middle. Like, does it really matter? Like, give me the couple of players next year. I could see them making that trade. And that's kind of what I always like to do with these is look at the standings before you do anything and then say, all right, well, what are the odds of this happening? Is that team in a rebuild or contending? And obviously, if they're contending and I'm contending, do I really want to help? All these different contextual pieces come in. But if I'm 7th, I'm looking at that trade like, give me the AJ Brown side. Like, I got nothing left to play for. I'm out. Give me the AJ Brown and the Barkley. I'll punt, come back next year and be strong and ready to roll. So that was kind of my other thought I meant to mention. But what was your trade there, Scott Stevens? And what was your thought process behind what you built? I know you got a couple that looks like here.
Yeah, I like it.
That's my bad. I didn't know that I was only allowed to do one.
No, this is great. Listen, every guest puts their own spin on it, so we love it.
You do it every week. I can't do 3 a week. You know what I mean? But I love it. I love the over.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. Yeah, go through it.
Well, and it was a couple things too. Was the last sentence in the breakdown of the team was I'm open to something big like moving AJ Brown or a small depth move. So I wanted to give options for both because at the same time, if you're only concentrating on one trade partner and it's like the guy we talked about in 99 Problems, you might not be able to get anything done. So maybe you look at a few avenues and I did the exact same thing as you, Andrew, in looking at the teams that missed the playoffs. And that might be more open to doing any kind of a deal, no matter what it is. And so I'll start with my lower ones. I'll start with my third one first, which was one of the lower end moves, which was like a third for Van Jefferson or AJ Green. I think both of those could be got for a third, or a second for Kirk. So with Hopkins out for the rest of the year, with Nuke gone the rest of the year, I was thinking, either AJ Green or Kirk, both, especially this week, even though he has a bye this week, but they've got Detroit this week. I think both of those are great starts and buys. And it seems like Van Jefferson is catching a bomb every other week. So, that's what I was looking at as far as a smaller move was concerned. Something that was a little bit bigger, I went to one of the other teams that was out of the playoffs, and I'm trying to find him right. Okay, so actually, my third one, Van Jefferson was on the bottom ranked team, King of the North, and then Christian Kirk is on the second to bottom team, which is his Dark Materials, Lord Ariel. Yeah, there you go, that one. He's got Kirk. Somebody else had AJ Green. But the other thing that I was looking at, so my second one, thank you. So my second, potential trade offer was, it felt like to me he was a little heavy at running back. And while I like Elijah Mitchell, there's also a scenario that I can see where, it's the Niners. One, he's banged up a lot. And, then the other thing is, they love their running back by committee. They could go a totally different direction next year. And Elijah Mitchell has a lot of value right now and a lot of name cash right now, especially if he's coming back healthy out of concussion protocol and everything. I felt like this team was a little light in the wide receiver. And so if he could get a young wide receiver for Mitchell, for somebody that was hurting at running back, which these teams were, and I left my notes at home, so I apologize, or at the office, so I apologize for that. But so I was looking at either Bateman or Hollywood for Elijah Mitchell straight up.
Yeah, Bateman's on Hip Hopopotamus, which I love that name, and then Marquise is on Suki, the other one we were talking about before. So both teams have missed the playoffs.
Yeah. And
Perfect.
and so either going for either one of those, or one of the other ones had Higgins. Was that high maintenance, or was that hippopotamus?
It was Gabagools. It's
Okay.
wrong,
Cousin
Higgins. It was full-blown trades.
Okay.
Full-blown trades. T. Higgins.
Shout out to Cousin
Higgins.
Vito.
Yeah.
Shout out to Cousin Vito.
There we go. Full-blown trades. And the other reason that I thought that was interesting was, and this was a personal thing, was he's got both Chase and Higgins. So he might be willing to part with Higgins since he's got two on the Bengals. Because
he's only got Miles Sanders. Like, he's definitely needy at running back. He's only got Miles Sanders. So I love that one. I thought that made too much sense. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So like a Mitchell, even if he's got to add a little, to get Higgins. I thought that one was another one that made sense. And then my number one was, and maybe it's because I did this earlier in the season myself, was I actually traded AJ Brown for Godwin straight up in one of the Dynasty Trades HQ leagues, the HQ2 that I'm in. And but the other reason that I liked it for him was he's got Brady, so he's got a stack now of Godwin and Brady, and if he gets a little bit of juice, with it, like I think I wrote in there, AJ Brown for Godwin in the third, but I would settle for Godwin straight up, doing that and having that stack through the playoffs with those matchups, because they've got the Saints this week while he's on his bye. And Saints probably play them tougher than anybody. So this is probably the week that I don't want a Godwin Brady stack. But moving forward after that, I would dig one. So those were kind of the three different ones that I looked at, but all of them were centered around trying to get some wide receiver production, because it felt like he was heavy at at running back and had plenty of depth there, and maybe use some of that depth, to grab a young wide receiver. Or if he did want to, move on from AJ Brown and he needed that big name to get another big name wide receiver, then Godwin was my other one for the stack with Brady. So that was my kind of thought process through the whole thing.
I love it. I love all of them. I love making the stack. That's always huge. I love moving a running back for a receiver, especially Bateman. I love that. And then even just the little ones with throwing a third or a second to try to grab those guys that are going to produce for the rest of the season and give you that nice fill in. So yeah, I'm on board all the way around there. I think he's gotten a lot of nice options here to figure something out.
Way to overachieve. I like that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Love it. I love it. Yeah. So I honestly looked at maybe doing some sort of small deal for like a quarterback. The problem is you can't really move. Like Ben and Heineke have zero value, especially to anyone else. Their actually most value is to you, because you need them to win the ship right now. So unfortunately Hurts is banged up. Hopefully he comes back, but I thought about maybe could you just throw for like even a Gardner Minshew or something, just so that way you have that direct replacement, something small like that. I know it's not fun, but it might be the difference, right? Now trading AJ Brown is never something I want to do, but if I were in this situation and I can win a ship, then I'm open to it. King in the North at the very bottom there. Now, when I'm rebuilding or when my team is rough like that, I don't want running backs. I don't want running backs scoring me points and moving me up and doing all that. And he's probably not competing next year. I realize DeAndre Swift is still very young and could certainly be around for when he is competitive. But in the meantime, I can rebuild faster without him, and I can add still a very young wide receiver. So I actually like this trade better for King in the North than I like it for Rocky, because I'm trading a running back for a young receiver. And, for me to trade a young wide receiver for a running back is almost blasphemy. But again, certain scenarios, going for the ship, trading AJ Brown to King in the North for DeAndre Swift. Now that also has some risk because we don't know that Swift is coming back for sure. So I'm banking on the fact that you have the bye this week, then Swift would be back the following week. Now, if I'm Detroit, I'm shutting him down for the season. But this is Detroit we're talking about, right? And so we can't trust them to make good decisions. And so maybe he could come back, and if he does, he's going to score a lot of points. So, and it's not like he's going to have zero value after this season. He's going to be around for a long time. So that was kind of my final thoughts there.
Well, I'll jump in here and say I'm 100% on board with this. If I am in that King of the North team and I'm bottom of the standings, Swift is easily the best player on that team, and easily the best player that you would move. Like, the first thing I would do is get him off my roster for value. I'm not giving him away, but I think getting a guy like AJ Brown, again, it insulates your risk. Receivers, generally speaking, last a little bit longer and are generally speaking not going to fall off a cliff, much like running backs can. Again, one knee injury to Swift, like we saw with ETN and Akers, and not knee injury to Akers, but you got like some of those injuries to Dobbins and things like that. Their value takes a significant hit. A receiver, it doesn't happen as often, and they're only touching the ball 8 to 10 times if you're lucky. That's a good time, but running backs get it 30 times, sometimes 20 times. Like, that's just the risk is higher to get injured. And I don't want anything on my roster right now that's going down in value. I mean, at this point, like, he's got the King of the North team already has Justin Fields and Deshaun Watson, Zach Wilson, perfect quarterback setup for that kind of a rebuild. Like, these are all three young players that have still got a lot of future. Watson's got a ton of risk. Wilson's got a ton of risk. Swift has no risk. What are you doing? Get risky. And going with AJ Brown gives you some options. So I thought that was a terrific trade. And I think too, there are people out there that would argue Swift, better than AJ Brown in a vacuum, and would say, dynasty startup wise, I'm taking Swift over. But if I'm looking at all of this context, if I'm this team, I think I'd rather have AJ Brown. I 100% get the logic.
Yeah. Well, and even if you have to throw in a third or something, like, fine, great. Always willing to do that. So yeah, man. Well, this worked out perfectly, and we're right on schedule here, closing our typical hour and a half, because that's what we do.
Nailed it.
Oh man, so yeah, this was great. A lot of great discussion, and man, Scott, awesome to have you on and get a chance to chat with you and get some of your thoughts. I know we have some similar mindset with the portfolio stuff, but those I always learn a lot. When I hear you and when I hear Scott and when we have these discussions, it just, you can always learn. You can always learn. You can always get better. And that's what I really enjoy and take away from this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Sitting with you guys, in a situation like this where it's three-way conversation kind of thing, like you said, we have similar mindsets, and we've got, for me, we've got good bones as far as our strategies are concerned, so hearing different kinds of strategies and stuff like that just kind of opens your mind or sets off a light bulb of, oh yeah, I can do that, but I can also even do that over here. And so, yeah, it's not even really, I don't even know if learning is the right thing, because I don't think any of us are smart enough to, to be teaching anything else. But I think what it does is it just gives us other avenues or other ideas, or lets us expand upon our own knowledge and our own strategies. And that's what I love about, this space and, the people in it, and, the Patreons and all that kind of stuff, surrounding yourself with smart people that, have, like I said, similar base structure as far as what they think about, but think about things in different avenues and stuff like that. I mean, like the point that you brought up about the King of the North's team, and the fact that he's probably 2 or 3 years away from competing. By the time he's ready to compete, Swift might be gone, kind of thing. So that's a great point that not a lot of people think about. There's been plenty of times where I've given advice of Swift's a great piece to build around. Well, what, to your point, context.
How long, right?
It's great to build around if you're going to be competing next year.
Right.
It's not great to build around if you're 3 years out, kind of thing. So, you're spot on. And that's, like I said, that's something that, I don't always think about, when it comes to that is, because I always feel like I'm going to be able to turn, something around quickly. And so, I'll look at those kind of building block pieces, but, you bring up a great point that I need to be a little bit more realistic on, am I a couple of years out? And if I am, then maybe I need to kick the can and, trade guys like a Swift, for a Bateman plus or whatever kind of thing, and get some of those young, higher end wide receivers that are especially attached to, or are going to be attached to an elite quarterback, and if you can do something like that while getting out from under, running back, then that's a great call. So I love it. This was great.
Cool, man. And if you want to continue the conversations with Scott and his advice and everything, you can find him in a couple Patreons we mentioned. The Dynasty Trades HQ, the Dynasty and Chill. He's very active in there. A lot of great advice and content. Also, you can follow him at FF Stockbroker, one of my favorite handles. That's just, I mean, is that just not perfect? I mean, that is just, I don't know how you got that. That is a beautiful thing. Yeah, so we'll finish up here with a little bit of our business. You can follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Junkies, proud member of the DAP network. For Rocky FF, what is it? FF Trade? No, sorry,
Dynasty.
I screw that up every time. Dynasty FF. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew Hall FF, myself at Scott_Sidlow. Subscribe, rate, and review anywhere and everywhere you listen. Jump on with us live. Get in the comments. Send us your FMATs here. Find me a trades. If your trade deadlines haven't passed at this point, we're still going to rock with those and help you guys out as much as we can. And yeah, we'll be back next week. We have just keep these guests lining up, man. We're going to keep bringing you content, keep helping you however we can and closing things out. And so for episode 76, Andrew, you want to take us out?
Junkies out.